Points. Happy Mindfulness Monday, and welcome to another episode of the Broad Points Podcast. I am your host, the Broad That Points, the Broad with the Points. It's me, Tyler, the lady. And welcome to episode 22, right? 22 of the Broad Points Podcast. You know, maybe we bounce around on occasion from different days of the week because why? We're human. It happens, right? Life happens. And sometimes we just go with the flow, right? I used to live a very rigid lifestyle. I used to have a very rigid way of thinking. Both being an athlete and being raised with parents that had, really high expectations, which led me to have really high expectations for myself. And, at points, it led me to just being so defeated when I didn't accomplish something exactly how I had originally set out to where I would just quit. And maybe you've find that that's similar, right? Maybe you've started some things and they didn't go exactly how you planned that they were going to go. And rather than pursuing them and finishing them out, seeing where it takes you, you quit, you give up, you decide, I don't want to do this anymore. And it's okay to give up on some stuff, right? If it's truly not for you, that's okay. You can be done with it. If it's not serving you, if it's not serving your values and your goals and your mission, you can absolutely say, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. I need to restart, right? Or begin again. And even if it is maybe the right medium in which you're supposed to portray this message, maybe you just need to begin again anyways because you want a new start, right? Maybe it's not the right scale. Maybe after all you decide you want to go with a different color palette. Maybe the goal isn't exactly affecting the group that you thought it was and you need to broaden your range. But all we have to do is start again. All we have to do is show up and really put in that practice. By putting in that practice of whatever we're working towards, right? Because we're all different beings. We all have different hobbies, passions. We don't all have to be the same. But what we do have to do is show up. And a quote from a classic movie is, I knew I had to show up in order for me to blow up. And that, of course, is B-Rad from Malibu's Most Wanted. Some of the movies that were made back in the day are just, wow, they just are absolutely hysterical. I can't believe the catalog of movies that I was allowed to watch at the age I was allowed to watch. I grew up in a daycare where it was mostly boys. So a lot of people don't know. I grew up in a daycare that was mostly boys. And then it was like I was the kind of the only girl there. And every now and then a couple girls would pass in and out when I was younger. And eventually they would start to come as I was older. But in the beginning, it was just us OGs. And we got to play the Nintendo 64, which, oh my gosh, when I went to Universal and saw that Mario World, next level, you guys. The attention to detail on that, like if you're a fan at all, and I don't continue to play video games, honestly, that is another thing that I quit, right? But that was because I was being like bullied and it was like, oh, you shouldn't be a nerd. And it's like, dude, that's so messed up. if you don't think it's nerdy, if it doesn't bother you, if you're passionate about it, don't let anybody else deter you from it, right? As long as you're not hurting yourself or anybody else around you, pursue your passions, pursue your interests. And if it's video games, golly, some of those kids that were playing Mario, or Donkey Kong, they're out there now creating some of the craziest games. So, really just allow yourself to pursue your passion, because you never know where it's going to take you. And then you never know what you're going to end up giving back to the world. And that's just a really fun thing to think about, is what's your mark, right? What are you leaving behind? And something that I like to leave behind are these fundamental phrases. So let's go ahead and jump into that for this week. It is, we are not the spoke, nor a group of spokes. We are the wheel. The whole entire wheel. We are the entire thing. We are not broken. We are not fragmented. We are whole beings. And parts of us, they may be forgotten, right? Like when we are atrophied and maybe distant memories of our strength, when those things are, maybe forgotten, they're not lost. We're not lost. You're exactly where you're supposed to be right now. And you're a whole person. You're made up of so many experiences, positive and negative, anabolic, catabolic, whatever we want to call them. All of these have made you who you are today. And that is beautiful. Because it's different than anybody else I have ever met. Right? Because everybody's unique. Everybody comes from somewhere else. And when we think about this fundamental phrase on the larger scale, that external scale, what we see is we're not just a piece of the puzzle, right? We're all the puzzle. We're not just a piece. Without each and every single piece, the image is incomplete. It's not a full puzzle if we're missing pieces. And so that's external, right? No matter who we are, no matter how big we feel our contribution is, we are a part of something. We are a part of something that is bigger than us. We are all connected. Whether you want to believe that spiritually or on the physical, day-to-day realness of the world, we are connected. We truly are. And when I like to think about this internally, right, because everything can be reflected both internally and externally. Internally here, we're all one body. And for me, that is like a very interesting idea. It was so hard for me to wrap my head around. I'm all one being. I'm all one body. Right? I think for so long in my life, I felt I was nobody. And at points, I felt I had no body. Right? I didn't celebrate drinking and alcohol for my 21st episode because I don't drink, right? That level of dissociation, detachment, depression that comes with alcohol is such a distant memory for me and something that I don't want to experience again. I don't think that that's something that I want to pass down to people, the acceptance of drinking in society, of blacking out, of just giving over your control of your body, of your mind. It lowers your inhibitions and like just gives you more toxicity to some certain levels. And there are people in my life who drink responsibly and have a great time, and like kudos to you for like knowing how to have alcohol in your life. I personally just don't drink. And I've been through enough stuff to know that that is not where I want to be, because I want to be present. I don't want to lose days, and I don't want to lose myself. And when I was drinking, I felt like the spirits would take over, right? Alcohol is referred to as spirits. And when you're just drinking nonstop, and hey, I worked in Alaska. I worked with a lot of people who didn't know if they were going to be alive again, and they were just happy to be there. They were happy to see you. And I mean, you celebrate with drinks. You do whatever it is that's societally acceptable. Whatever's been normalized, that's just what you do. And I'm tired of doing that. I'm tired of doing what's normal. I'm tired of doing what's expected of me or what's expected of us. Sometimes we just have to have the hard conversations. We have to up our goals. We have to decide that we want to live differently, that we want to do things differently, that we want to pass down generational blessings instead of generational traumas. And for me, self-love, self-acceptance, you can drink, you can do whatever you want. Have a vice, please, by all means. I'm not saying don't have a vice, because that would be absurd. I don't care. But what I'm saying is find connection with your body. Our body is constantly communicating with us and telling us what's going on with us, how we're interacting with the world, how the world is affecting us. And I remember when I used to stretch, and I really felt like I was trying to stretch away from myself. I was reaching as far as I could past my limit, past me, past my mere mortal self. And I was noticing that I was putting myself down. I was putting myself down while I was stretching, and it was making me tense up. It was stressing me out, like I had to escape from myself in order to be better. It's the little stories underneath what's happening in the struggle, right? I just knew I was trying to reach as far as I possibly could, and I was going to feel that stretch. I was going to feel the intensity and the severity, and I felt like I really had to push. I felt like I really needed to be broken down in order to reach my greatest potential. There was like, somewhere along the way, there was this switch in my brain that was just like, what if you're not trying to stretch away from yourself, and you're trying to find the space within? You know where it came from? This really awesome yoga teacher, black robe yogi teacher, who just had some really awesome wisdom. And she talked about the space between our bones, the space between our joints, and all of the things that fill the human body. And instead of just thinking about being, like just bone, like a sack of bones, or, a bunch of muscle or whatever, I started to think about how everything all played together. Right? And there's like the dumb song, like your knee bones connected to your... It's a real thing. Everything within us is all connected. We are all one. We can't outstretch ourselves. We can find space within ourselves to move. And I don't know if you've seen Cirque du Soleil or some of these people who can just fold themselves into pretzels and like roll all around, and it just looks like their limbs are dislocated. It's nuts. But think about the space that they have within themselves to be able to crumple themselves up into these little balls. It is absolutely nuts. But they believed they could do it. Maybe nobody else could do it. They might not even know anybody else could do it unless they were born into the circus. They might know somebody else that could do it. But if they weren't, then they just had to believe. All they had to do was believe in themselves, just like all you have to do is believe in yourself. No matter what your goal is, no matter where you're going on this journey, the number one thing you have to do is believe that you can get there. By acknowledging that we're not broken, we're not fragmented. We're whole. We're whole beings who have lived our whole lives to gain a whole catalog of experiences and lessons that we can draw upon to recognize our strengths. And people like to, maybe use some scripture for that. Maybe you're religious. Maybe, you use the Bible, right? You can call upon whatever you want. My grandma would probably slap me across the face, honestly. She heard me saying this at this point. But I believe that we're allowed to have our own individuality. I believe that you're allowed to find your own spirituality. And spirituality does not mean religion. You do not have to be religious in order to find spirituality and to find spiritual practices. Right? You can just incorporate your own belief system. I remember in high school, one of my friend's dads, he actually believed that we were all dolls in a dollhouse. And some bigger person outside of the universe was playing with us. And they would play with us, and then I think that they would go to sleep, and then we would wake up and we'd be living our lives. So it's just, everybody has their own belief system. Everybody is allowed to. And it's, like I said, as long as you're not hurting anyone, and you're not hurting yourself, you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to find comfort in your own beliefs and your own practices. So, no, you have a full catalog of your own strengths, right? You're not broken. You're whole. And even if you start to feel a little lost along the way, you can always be found because it's within you. Whatever we choose to hold on to, that's what takes up space within us. We can choose to let things go. We can choose to create space for new experiences, for new people, for new love. Honestly, for so many things we can open up our hearts to. And we can also open up to ourselves, right? We can find a kindness for ourselves. We can decide that, hey, today we're going to be nice to ourselves, right? And maybe along the way today, we slip up. We say something a little mean. That's okay. Guess what? We can begin again. It's so easy, you guys. It's so easy to just begin again. We don't have to completely beat ourselves to crap. We don't have to give up, right? We don't have to relinquish all control because it didn't go the way we thought it was going to at the start. No, instead, we can begin again. We can begin again and recognize that it's not just this single experience. It's not just this one effort. Everything is all collected together to reflect the efforts of our entire life. And so, if you feel like you want to reflect, you're listening to this podcast, well, guess what? You can like and follow me and rate and review and subscribe. I'm on social media at Broadpoints or at Tyler the Lady. And if you want to send me an email, well, you can. It is broadpointspodcast@gmail.com. And one more time with that fundamental phrase for the week. We are not the spoke, nor a group of spokes. We are the wheel.